I am on a nightly walk. I try to walk daily. Fortunately, I live in a place where people have very loud exhausts. The reason I am adding my walk to this podcast episode is because today we're talking about how walking can help free your mind for creative thinking and how you can use walks to help break through some roadblocks you're hitting in your creative process. Additionally, we're going to talk about the exact opposite, how sometimes sitting, focus, and restricting your thought process is going to create more creative opportunities. Very thankful for you joining me for another episode. I'm your host, Tripp Fusco. Let's do a quick title sequence, and I'll see you on the other side. I just want it to be a conversation, and there's just a camera over the shoulder.
Accept that there's people that are going to be better than you at that specific thing. So I know there's going to be someone that's better at editing.
You know, and you could sit around and say, well, I haven't started on the main script because I'm waiting for it to be inspired, right? When you show up and you sit down and you go to your spot, the inspiration does come.
If I don't put my skin in the game, shed a bit of blood, how could I expect for the return I'm hoping for to be as severe as the sacrifice?
A lot of people will be like, I could never do, I have no idea how to do, and I didn't either for the most part. It's just sitting down and taking the time to learn it once, and then when you do, it's like, oh my gosh.
I don't even know if does it look, wow. It's actually zeroed out. This is literally just a prop. I had coffee in it earlier. Keep it here, it looks good. Welcome to another episode of Imitates Life with your host, me, Tripp Fusco. Today I'm very excited about what I have to share with you. Today's episode is two parts that kind of contrast each other, which is really cool. If you heard the intro, if I even used the intro, there are a few things in my life that I really like. The first is my ritualistic walks. So I walk the Arizona Canal. I get to cross it sometimes. Some beautiful sunsets where I'm at. You get to see Camelback. You get to see the mountains I used to live by, Lookout, and not South Mountain. Those are completely different areas. It's the Phoenix Preserve. I live over by the McDowell Preserve now, and it's really cool because, you know, you go on these walks, and I just kind of like leave my apartment because I work from home, and I do this from here, and I live here, I sleep here, I play video games here, I relax here. I do most of my life in the same 700 square feet. But there's an entire universe out there that I want to go be a part of. So I go out on walks. And a lot of people I've heard of recommend walks. And or podcasts I listen to, stuff like that, they recommend walks. Even in a lot of books, they recommend walks. Lots of different books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He says to walk around your neighborhood to see, what's going on. He says go for a run, but you don't have to go for a run. And if you also can't walk, you don't have to walk. Find a way to get around though, because there's multiple parts to it. It's not just the act of the ambulatory movement. That might be redundant. It's just not moving. It's also like seeing visually the world move at that pace. Like you're moving through the world. So not necessarily you having to stride, but like going through the earth. And it's really cool because there are a lot of reasons to do this. So many different reasons. But this being a creative podcast, a creativity podcast, the focus is creativity and its beautiful effect on life. It's Hunter said in his episode that it is one of the closest things we can do to God, if you believe in that. I think creation is one of the most beautiful things because it is the closest you can feel to God, in the sense that, like, you can feel to a God. Like, you are creating. You are the god or goddess in the situation, building things, creating things. And, creation is very much an important thing to me. And I think it should be to everyone. And with the advent of AI, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to talk about that because it's just, everyone else is talking about it, and I'm honestly sick of hearing those two letters. Like, sucks that they're both vowels, right? Like, it sucks that artificial intelligence starts with two vowels, because now I can't use two of, like, what are there, like, 6 vowels? Like, it's frustrating, Like, how do you spell male? M-A-I-A-I. I don't use ChatGPT. That's what it feels like every conversation is these days. Like, literally everyone is just saying those two letters, and it's really annoying. Going back to what this podcast isn't about, creativity. The second part to this episode is the kind of inverse. We're going to look at it. It's the research someone did for me, my research assistant did for me, broke it down into 4 parts. 3 of them are about the walking cure, it calls it. And the last part is about limitations. And limitations are also a breeding ground for creativity as well. And I think these are 2 of my favorite ideas when it comes to creativity, because just going for a walk is just a pleasant thing, even if you don't need to be creative, right? But, like, there's something that happens when you're on walks that just, like, releases in your mind. Like, you're just, like, it's kind of like foam rolling, right? You have these tight muscles, and you put them through this, like, pressure, and in the process of going through this pressure, they start to release, right? And it's similar to that, or maybe, like, it just frees your mind up. It's relaxing the muscles, the tension of your day, kind of letting this, like, focus just drift. The other is, pure focus. It is, like, intentional. You have a problem, you have to solve it. Here's how you can solve. Here's what you can solve it with. Full Apollo 13. Dump the stuff on the table and say, we have to fill this hole with this stuff. How do we make it happen? So let's just kind of get into it. I really love the informal nature of this. I mean, it's nice for me because I'm a very informal person, but it's also nice because I can just set up when I decide that it's time to do one of these. And my setup today is quite bare bones. I don't have any lights up. I'm using my in-home lighting. I didn't even close my blinds this time. I have just my phone, a notepad, and my mic set up. Like, my camera, it took me all of 3 minutes to set up this setup right now. And for those of you who are just listening, it is the most beautiful video I've ever made. It's honestly, I might win an Oscar for cinematography. It's so beautiful. If you do end up looking at the show, you will agree. Looking at this episode, it talks about, let's start with the first breakdown, the kinetic imperative, the science of walking and cognition, 1.1, the sedentary crisis, and the ambulatory solution. For centuries, the link between walking and thinking was the province of anecdote in philosophy. The Latin phrase solvitur ambulando, it is solved by walking, attributed to Diogenes, the Cynic, captured the intuitive understanding that problems interactively in stillness often yield to movement. Friedrich Nietzsche famously declared, "All truly great thoughts are conceived while walking." And Jean-Jacques Rousseau confessed, "I can only meditate when I'm walking. When I stop, I cease to think. My mind operates only with my legs." Despite this rich historical pedigree, the mechanisms underlying this phenomenon remained largely unexplored by rigorous science until the early 21st century. So there we have philosophers. from different parts of history. I've heard their names. I'm not a philosopher, but I play one on TV. And they all have these quotes that, go to the idea that, walking frees your mind up to the world, to the universe, to whatever it is. And what kind of came out in research when they finally did start researching it, there was a landmark study from Stanford in 2014. Researchers Marilee Opeza, some researchers from Stanford University's Graduate School of Education published a pivotal study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Learning, Memory, and Cognition titled "Give Your Idea Some Legs: The Positive Effect of Walking on Creative Thinking." This research constitutes the most robust empirical validation of the relationship between walking and creative generation to date. The study was meticulously designed to isolate the specific variable of walking from other potential confounders such as environmental stimulation, fresh air, nature views. They broke it down into criteria. Novelty comes up again because creativity does breed some novelty, right? But it's not necessarily always just novelty, right? There's other aspects to creativity. And the second thing was appropriateness. The idea must be realistic and feasible. When an idea was decided it was novel was when no other participants came up with it. And to ensure rigor, the researchers tested participants in varied conditions, sitting indoors. Participants sat in a small windowless room. Walking indoors, participants had a treadmill in that room. Sitting outdoors, sat in a wheelchair in a pleasant, leafy part of campus. And then walking outdoors, participants walked along paths on campus. So the results came in, and sitting in a boring-ass room, the baseline was the lowest for creative performance. The walking on a treadmill in a boring-ass room, movement alone drives divergent thinking, independent or visual stimuli. Very little increase, but there was an increase. And then sitting outside in a wheelchair, it boosted it a little bit, but that was without kinetic movement. Then when they went outside and they walked, it was the highest improvement, where when you were just walking on a treadmill, you had a bit of a boost. Being outside was a bit of boost. Walking outside was 80 to 100% improvement. A critical finding for workflow design was the discovery of a residual effect. The researchers observed that participants who walked first and then sat down to work retained significantly higher creative scores than those who had not walked at all. This suggests that the neurochemical and cognitive state induced by walking has a half-life persisting for a window of time after the physical activity ceases. This has immense practical implications. One does not need to conduct the meeting while walking to benefit. One can walk to the meeting and still harvest the cognitive dividends of up to 60% more creative thought, more novelty, more appropriate thoughts towards this. And a little bit later, we're going to get into like why this happens and the mechanisms of this. But some of the people that they're going to start listing later, obviously Nietzsche, Rousseau, and Diogenes are some of the people that they referenced the first time. But a little bit later, we're going to talk about people that you actually know, like Steve Jobs, famously went on walking meetings. He said, "Walk with me, talk with me," and they would move and they would go around, Cupertino or Stanford or wherever he was at the time, and they would have walking and talking meetings. And apparently, he went on a walking meeting with Bob Iger when they closed the deal between Pixar and Disney. And it was on this walk that Jobs decided to be extremely vulnerable and share with Bob Iger that he was dying of cancer. To hear this stuff retrospectively is very interesting because, he was conducting business deals as he was Walter Whiting his way out. He was just just always trying to find the best way to get the most out of people. And I mean, he also sounded like a bit of a dick, but sometimes you gotta crack some eggs to make an omelet. There's a dad expression for everything in life, and I will find it. So, getting back to this actual discussion, this has immense practical implications. One does not need to conduct the meeting you don't have to walk for the meeting in order to get the benefits. You could walk to the meeting or just walk before the meeting, do a lap around the building. There are two kind of mechanisms. There's divergent thinking and there's convergent thinking. Thinking that goes with other people and thinking that doesn't go with other people. Maybe I said that. I have no idea what I said the first time. The Stanford Study did not claim that walking improves all thinking. It made a crucial distinction between two cognitive modes, divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is the process of generating many unique solutions to open-ended problems. It is characterized by fluency, flexibility, and originality. These are the Apple think differently, to go back to Steve Jobs. But like, that's the concept of divergent thinking. It's just going, okay, this is how we've done it forever. What if we do it differently? Yeah, sure, taxis run New York City, but what if you could order a taxi on your phone and you didn't have to call and it wasn't a creepy person, but it was vetted? Wasn't it nice when YouTube vetted it, or Uber vetted its drivers? It was great. Yeah, I don't think they actually ever did. I think since they've existed, it's always been like, who are these strangers driving us? They're crazy. Sidetrack. But the idea of convergent thinking, by contrast, involves narrowing down multiple possibilities to find the single correct answer. This is going to start getting into the two kind of ideas, right? So there's the abundance mindset, that there's a whole universe of possibilities out there for you to reach out and grab a star. And then there is the scarcity mindset, which is there's only a few opportunities, so you have to take what you can get, hold on as tight as you can, and hope that it never leaves you. And while those are two extremes, right, they are different. They're in contrast of each other, right? I mean, you can find a middle ground, right? Like, the world is full of opportunities. But once I grab my opportunity, I'm going to hold on to it because you know what? There's maybe so many, but I only need one. Maybe that's kind of how you want to go about it. But the interesting thing is walking boosted divergent thinking. So it is kind of like when you really need to find a way to look at all possibilities, you want to go for a walk. You want to find all creative opportunities. You're going to try and find like ways to solve financial problems, or, it gives a great example of like a person who, I can't remember if it's from this deep research that I populated or if it was from a podcast or something, or even just like a book I'm listening to, but they gave a great example of there's a woman who is really stressed at work and at home and just is stuck in life and gets a health scare. And so she starts running. And she finds that as she runs, not only is it good for her like actual physical health, her heart, her lungs, her muscles, but she also finds that she's having great ideas on how to fix her financial issues. And she's feeling less stressed out about, her relationship with her husband or her kids and things like that. And it kind of opens up more to her in her life. It's not just, again, it brings you into a life of abundance, right? You go into that divergent mindset. Here are the results. So for divergent thinking, the study found that walking improved divergent thinking by 81% to 100% of participants across the various experiments. The free flow of the body appeared to unlock the free flow of the mind. The convergent thinking results were inverted. Participants who walked performed slightly worse on convergent tasks than those who sat. The cognitive load of managing locomotion, however, minimal appeared to compete with the intense, laser-focused attention required for convergent problem solving. The idea isn't necessarily one solve it, like you're not going to find one thing that solves everything. And I think it's really interesting because there's always been a lot of that, right? There's always been a lot of that. I feel like my entire life, there's just been, get the sham wow. You'll never use another towel again kind of my mentality, right? It's like a one solution fits all. And there's just so many times, like I have people in my life, people that I grew up with who like were always, whether it was their parents or it was them, they were always a victim to the trends. And they always were looking for that next solution. And unfortunately, I was one of those people too. So I'm speaking from experience. There is so much out there about like, well, if you do keto, it's going to solve all your problems. If you wear mouth tape, it's going to solve all your problems. If you, and like, it's so interesting because there's so many TikTok ads or Instagram reels because I'm ancient. There's so many Instagram reels that I see where it's like, the second the sponsor comes up and it's like, the YouTube ones are the worst. It's like, what would happen if you did Tai Chi every day? Well, if you did Tai Chi every day, and this is an AI video, but like it was clearly like the guy like took a picture of himself shirtless, took a video of himself shirtless for like 10 minutes because I've looked into how to create AI doubles. And so, but he's always shirtless, shredded, but he's shirtless. And so he's like standing there, but he's like talking into like a microphone like this. And the person who's interviewing him is clearly not a real person. And they also aren't making eye contact. And so it is like one of the most AI videos I've seen. And it's really, really weird. And it's dystopian. And it's very much the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Because I'm watching this thing and it's like, Tai Chi actually can help strengthen men over the age of 40. If you think Tai Chi is just, blah, 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 you're wrong. It's actually, here's what the results people see. After 10 days, they start blah, blah, blah. After 14 days, they start blah, blah, blah. After 20 days, they blah, blah, blah. Within 1 month, you're completely unrecognizable. And so seeing these people throughout my life who kind of fall for this, and again, falling for this myself, right? I was joking with my buddy the other day. I was like, oh man, you got a nice, like, you can actually like spread out your toes. That's crazy. Cause I heard on a Huberman podcast once that you should be able to, like, theoretically, you're supposed to be able to move each toe individually. And I have not met one person who can do that. Like, they're a freaking orangutan, but like, that's crazy. And then he said it, and then he's like talking about toe spreaders and how they help with the like musculature of your foot. And I can't speak to it, but like he talked so much about it that I was interested. And then I saw people squatting with them, and then I saw they just kept repeating. And as Daniel Kahneman would tell you, that's how beliefs are formed, right? Because you hear it originally and you're like, that's bogus. And then confirmation bias starts happening. The more you hear it, the more it becomes a reality. And then next thing you know, we're living in the world we live in today because someone said something enough people said something for you to believe it. So you buy toe spacers, and now you have toe spacers, and you're commenting on your friend's toe space. It's a weird world we live in. Like, I never thought I would ever care about that or consider that or anything like that. And I said that, and then he was like, oh yeah, I've always been able to do that. And I was like, yeah, I got some toe spacers, like trying to spread out my toes. And this is such a weird podcast. No way anyone makes it this part, but thank you for listening to my toe talk. Yeah, and then I had said, like, oh, I have these toe spacers that I never freaking use. And he's like, oh, I got the same ones. And so it's like, oh, we both fell victim to it. Obviously, it worked for him. It's like one of those things where, like, I have mouth tape. I have those. I have nose strips to try and breathe better at night because there's those ads about the, like, magnet ones. And there's so many different things where I'm just like, okay, you're telling me that if I get this, it's going to solve all my problems. Even this podcast, like, I don't think this idea of creativity is going to solve the world's problems, but I know that creativity has helped me a lot, and I think it can help you unlock different parts of yourself that you never thought you could. And It's a really cool process. Getting back to this. Walking is not a one cure fix all, right? If you need to look at a problem for a long enough time to see the actual one way out, like full on Avengers, Infinity War, Endgame BS, there's only one way. In the infinite universe, there's only one way that this happens. Then you need to not go for a walk. You need to sit in a small, quiet room, as little distractions as possible, and narrow in on the one possible solution. But let's say you just need to, you feel like you've exhausted all your problems, right? You're just like, I just can't get past this edit. This edit feels clunky. This edit feels out of sorts. This lady does not make sense in this environment, but this is where all our B-roll was shot. That doesn't matter. You're not going to solve the problem by just staring at it sometimes. You got to get up and you got to go out. You got to move. And you got to go be in nature for a little bit. And you just got to... Something that I heard about was they don't know the full science of this and they're looking into it. But one of the things about being in nature that is so calming, that isn't the same with seeing a photograph or seeing like a picture, an AI image especially, is that there's no way to replicate what you experience when you're in nature. Your mind has a switch that is able to process and then like, so okay, I'm gonna gotta do everything in a analogy, a metaphor. It's all about how can I explain this a different way is my whole life. Okay, so when Netflix originally started, Blockbuster was the big kid on the block, right? Because you go in, you get the DVD, you put it, you take it home, you put it in your DVD player, you watch the movie in full resolution, you take it back, you give it back. Netflix changed the game by delivering theirs. And then they took a step further when they realized most people don't know the difference between full range of what they're watching and a really shitty replication, right? Like if we can take this full movie that is actually like 3 gigabytes and we take it down to 300 megabytes by reducing the bit rate, right? And all these other aspects to it that I don't fully understand. But essentially what happened with streaming is it is a smaller file. So they're taking out a lot of information, right? If you're a photographer, this is a better analogy. So there's the raw photo. You take a raw photo, it's about 50 megabytes. You export a JPEG, which is about 2 to 18 megabytes. It's got less information because it doesn't need more information. And then when you get into screenshots and stuff like that, you're just losing all that information. Whereas like when you have the raw file, you have the ability to adjust a lot more and do a lot of changes, right? When you have the full movie, you can actually see like the full depth and the bokeh and the crisp lighting and all of that. But when you stream it, it's actually different. You aren't, especially in those original early days, you are losing a lot of the quality, and you don't really notice it because TVs are so good now. But also, if you watch something on Netflix and it's like streaming poorly, you can tell. And so that is what happens in your brain when you're in nature. When you see a tree, you don't just see every single leaf. What your mind does is it simplifies it. It says, okay, there's a bunch of leaves. And so it's doing this active lowering of the bit rate, or turning what you're seeing, that image you're seeing, from raw into a JPEG in your mind. But when you look at a computer, that complexity stays. So when you're staring at a computer and your mind's making something of it, it has, even if it's built of fractals the same way all, organic matter in nature is, right? It's built up of itself is how I understand fractals to exist. When you're looking at a computer or a camera or your phone, your brain can't process it the same way as nature. So go out into nature and then move. And so when you're doing that right? Because like there was still a boost just being in nature, not as big of a boost as walking, right? Because what walking does is it starts moving blood throughout your body to your brain. And it also allows, if you're in nature, for that kind of shut off to happen. So we're going to go into part 2, the neurobiological underpinning of the walking cure. I've talked about hypofrontality, and it's really funny because I was telling my brother-in-law about how in the first episode I brought up hypofrontality. I misrepresented the information because I didn't take Latin in high school, and I got it confused with hyper, whereas hypo means none, hyper means active, like a lot, right? Or, it's active versus non-active. And so hypofrontality, right, is when your executive brain, your frontal lobe kind of gets to shut off and you go into like a flow state. That's what flow state is. You get into a state of hypofrontality. And when you're walking, you are in a phase of transient hypofrontality. So one of the most compelling theoretical frameworks explaining the creativity movement link is transient hypofrontality, a concept championed by neuroscientist Arne Dijkstra. I don't know why I try to read these. I really want to give credit to these people, but I am butchering their names. The theory posits that the brain has finite metabolic resources. When an individual engages in physical activity, the motor cortices and sensory systems require significant energy to coordinate movement, balance, and spatial navigation. To compensate, the brain temporarily down-regulates the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of executive function. I had explained that a little bit. I talked about that in other episodes, but basically like executive function is decision making, right? So like, where you want to go to eat, what do you want to do today? What clothes should I wear? And additionally, it's also, how do I feel about myself? It is, how do I feel about the fact that the shirt is a little tighter because I washed it poorly, or I gained 20 pounds, or I lost 30 pounds, or I am still the same weight and I don't know why I have this shirt because it's never fit and I should get rid of it. In a state of high prefrontal cortex activation, the brain is hypercritical, dismissing unconventional ideas before they even reach conscious awareness. During walking, the mild downregulation of the prefrontal cortex lowers the inhibitory filter. This allows remote associations, abstract concepts, and wacky ideas to bubble up to the surface. It induces a state similar to daydreaming or the hypnagogic state between wakefulness and sleep. This explains why walking specifically aids divergent thinking, which needs low inhibition, but hinders convergent thinking. So that's a really cool explanation. I feel like I could do better, but I'm learning this as you are. And I have read this before. I'm rereading parts of it because I think that this is, honestly, I think this is one of the better shows I've put together. I'm really proud of this. You know what? It came from a walk. I was on a walk. I started filming myself. I said, you know what? On Saturday, I said Sunday. On Sunday, I said Monday. And today is Monday. Before work, I was debating whether or not I go to work out. And I did. But I'm working through an injury right now. And then after work, I was like, well, I kind of want to play my video game. So then I played my video game and I got wrapped up in that really quickly. And then next thing I know, I had to cook dinner. And then I cooked dinner and I was like, oh, football's on. And I'm watching football. And I finished my dinner and I was just like, I really need to go. I need to get out of here. Like I haven't done much today in the movement category. So let's go for a walk. Let's go take a sauna. That's going to help for bed, because apparently you need to lose 3 degrees of temperature to fall asleep, something like that. And so if you heat yourself up before you go to sleep with like a hot tea or a sauna or a hot shower, theoretically raise your internal temperature, so it's easier to lower your internal temperature and fall asleep a little bit easier. So it was on that walk that I was like, oh shoot, I really should stop, that inner critic went away. And because that inner critic is the one who says like, oh, you didn't read enough, or you're not smart enough to talk about this, or you're not articulate enough to talk about this. That's something that I also feel like I'm not a lot of the times. And it's really funny because I'll use words around my coworkers and they'll be like, dude, what the heck is your vocabulary? Like I recently was talking to my coworkers and I accidentally mansplained something to a woman. And she was like, no, I understand what that is. And I was like, I'm so sorry, but you looked befuddled. And then everyone stopped what they were saying and we're like, what? No one uses the word befuddled. And that's the same person who thinks that they're not that articulate, right? So it's just, that inner critic, we all have it. It just starts nagging at us, right? It's just all day long. And so I went for a walk, and then I was barely into my walk, and I was like, you know what? Who cares? I'm going to record my podcast tonight. And then I got home and I was so motivated to do it that I made the most simple setup I could. And it actually looks decent. I mean, it's not the best, but it's better. It's really cool to know that I could do this for a lot less effort, right? And so the next part is going to talk about a different brain function, and that's the default mode network. Walking activates the default mode network, often referred to as the brain's imagination network. The DMN, default mode network, is a network of interacting brain regions that is active when a person is not focused on the outside world, when they are daydreaming, envisioning the future, or recalling memories. In a sedentary, task-focused environment, the task-positive network is dominant, suppressing the DMN. However, research suggests that the rhythmic, automatic nature of walking allows the brain to toggle effectively between engagement with the environment and the internal reflection of the default mode network. This state of mind wandering with purpose is fertile ground for creative insight, allowing the brain to make non-linear connections between disparate pieces of information stored in long-term memory. And for those of you who don't know, disparate is different than desperate. I've made a fool of myself a time or two when I've heard a word that I've never heard before that sounds like a word that I've heard before and been like, disparate? I think you mean desperate. And they're like, no, I don't, buddy. They're actually completely different things. And so that is funny too, because that is kind of the definition of disparate. And so the idea of going on these walks and that abundance is kind of going back to, I think, something from the previous episode, which is like, it was talking about the brain circuits, and we were talking about like brain battery, and it was creating more infrastructure for your brain in order to turn back to that later in life. And so that's one of the things that's really cool about creativity is as you do diverse things and you get more diverse experiences, you have more infrastructure for your brain to work. And so then you're going to be able to have situations where these kind of different things come together. And so like you're going into those divergent ideas where, maybe, just maybe, you can use statistics in baseball to actually engage, or use economics in baseball to actually like create a winning baseball team out of the lowest franchise cap or salary pool, whatever. I'm talking about Moneyball. I'm trying to describe what happened in Moneyball, where they took the idea of economics or, like actual like statistics, and they applied them to baseball, and they changed the game forever. You can look at all these different things where people took, Joseph Campbell saw that the entire world was telling stories the exact same way. Like, that is crazy, right? And like that might even be convergent, but he had to go on, I'm sure he went on a couple walks to come to that conclusion. It's really cool. I don't know. It might be confirmation bias, and it also might be an AI hallucination. I am using AI to create these episodes. I want you to know that, because I hate myself for it. No, I don't. I'm using AI for the things I can't do myself, because obviously AI is a tool. Okay, I'm getting into this. Obviously AI is a tool, right? But for me, I wouldn't make these episodes if I had to do the research myself. There were several years before AI existed that I could have been doing this, and I wasn't. In high school, I once had a research paper that my teacher gave me like a month to research. We had time in class to research and write and get sources together on a topic. And I had my topic from this documentary I'd watched, and I had found some resources, and I really didn't put much effort into it until, and I'm not kidding, it was Friday night when it was due. I had just played a football game, and I went to my buddy's place because he also played on the team. We both had to finish our papers for this class. And so I'm not a research guy. I'm not always a follow-through guy. I want to be a follow-through guy. I'm working to be a follow-through guy. I am a follow-through guy when it comes to the power of positive thinking. But without AI deep research, I would not be able to have such a wide breadth of information to pull from. And I definitely wouldn't be citing studies from Stanford to support arguments or even ideas that like I kind of intuitively found, right? Because I like walking, but I've never actually put two and two together that like the walking was actually helping me be more like creative. And I never really put like, because I always did get good ideas on walks, but it wasn't like, oh, that's why I'm going on the walk. I go on the walks because I need like mental breaks. And I started working out for the same reason. But getting back to this, right? AI is a bit of a problem because there's people who want to use it instead of like, yes, I'm sure there's people who get the creative need filled through research, but that is not me. And, it is deductive reasoning, and it is, I guess, in large part a good amount of creativity, and critical thinking. But like, I don't know. I'm trying to be my own pessimist right now, or my own adversary, and see like, because the argument I'm trying to make is, as a visual creator, it is really difficult going up against something like AI, because people think that they can just make whatever they want. And it actually takes a lot of work, effort, and skill to even get the best out of AI. I can't do it. And I was taught in actual industry terminology. I know people who will do a really good job, but it's still like there's still clearly AI, or there's just aspects to it that are like, okay, well, that's actually physically impossible, right? It's really hard to have like my self-preservation side want to degrade AI because people are using it to kind of kill my industry, but also and like argue that like my stuff is no longer important. Especially the thing that I'm saying is creativity is very important for us. And like, even though you're not good at art, doing art for 45 minutes a day will actually help you like help cognitive load later in life, is a crazy concept that I'm actually now considering like the fact that that's really worrisome. All these people who are using AI to do critical thinking, to do all these tasks. And like, yes, I'm doing it, but like, I don't know. okay, my idea is that like I'm doing it to help me do something more. Whereas I feel like the problem that I see is people using it to do less, right? Like I want to think less. I want to, and guess what? If you want to use AI to make decisions for you because you're just so sick of making decisions and your executive function, function of your brain is just kind of worn out. Well, guess what? It's not going to solve the problem because you still have to train the AI and blah, 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 blah. You're actually going to weaken your executive function because you're outsourcing that skill. But you know what might actually help relieve the tension in the executive area of your brain, the prefrontal cortex? Going for a walk. That's crazy. My point is to say, AI is one of those things where like you can either use it as a tool to get more out of life or you can do it to, get less. And I think it's really interesting because that is the difference. Like that's the dividing line. I feel like, thank you for listening. To me, work that out mentally. That's the dividing line for me, right? Like I feel like a lot of times, and this is me too, there's a lot of times where I just try to try my hardest to outsource to AI and not have to think about it at all. But like I will be reading these and I'm like, I don't know about that or whatever, and like I said, I read these before I actually do this to make sure that like it kind of is in line with what I want to say, and also gives me ideas on like what to talk about and also like what is going on in this. But it's very interesting that the walking helps shut off that executive function. So getting into the next part, the hemodynamics and neurochemistry. Again, I think this might be a little out of my depth, but you know what the beauty of life is swimming in deep waters. People who tell me they're scared of the ocean, it's like, yeah, we all are. But as someone who's like swam in 800 foot deep water and like literally thought like, holy shit, the whole earth is under me right now. It's still awesome. Like it's terrifying. You're scared as hell. But it's still worth doing. The hemodynamics and neurochemistry, the physiological effects of walking are equally significant. Cerebral blood flow, like I said, blood going throughout the whole body and up to the brain, BDNF and neurogenesis. Aerobic activity triggers the release of brain-derived neurotropic factor, often described as miracle grow for the brain. Last episode, I asked AI to dumb this down to the level of like a high school junior so I could understand it. And it just started giving me like only analogies that were like, imagine you're in class and you're late to class. And I was like, no, I meant like, just don't use big words. And so I didn't use that on this one. And they're using nothing but big words. BDNF supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new synapses and neurons. Neurogenesis is what that process is called, particularly in the hippocampus, the region associated with memory and learning. Wow. Okay. So one thing that's interesting about this is like I've heard a lot of these terms like hippocampus and prefrontal cortex and anterior singular cortex, right? I've heard them explained so many times, but it's just like one of those things where it just takes time to figure out what is actually being said. I'm actually starting to like understand what different things do, and hopefully I can retain the knowledge. Hopefully my hippocampus is growing because I did work out, I did walk, I do go to the gym, mainly for the mental benefits. So the hippocampus is the region associated with memory and learning, while neurogenesis is a long-term benefit, the acute release of BDNF, miracle grow for the brain. Combined with dopamine and serotonin, a shout out provides an immediate mood and cognitive boost. Dopamine and blink rates. Studies have shown a correlation between eye blink rates, a marker of dopamine levels, apparently, and divergent thinking scores during unrestricted movement. Walking may modulate dopamine transmission in a way that enhances cognitive flexibility. we're kind of getting this idea in these episodes, which is super cool because I'm kind of building a blueprint for how I want my life to look, which is super cool because, like, I don't know about you, but I feel pretty aimless sometimes. I feel like my life doesn't have a purpose, and people are like, find your purpose. And I'm like, that's like 3 words that could take a life to figure out. I heard this great thing that, like, Kobe Bryant found his purpose at 13 and, like, was able to get to the NBA and win multiple championships because he did. But also, like, Napoleon Hill, author of Think and Grow Rich. He also wrote another book that was, like, unabridged, and then they abridged it down to Think and Grow Rich. The unabridged version, so basically, Napoleon Hill, when he was a kid, met, like, Andrew Carnegie, I think it was. And he was like, oh my gosh, or maybe it was Charles Schwab. Anyway, he met someone who was just like an absolute, like, mogul, like Elon Musk of, like, the 1800s, 1900s. And he wanted to write a book. Like, he was so fascinated about these people. He wanted to write a book about how you become such a successful person. And he learned from these people, and he studied, and he observed them, and he came out with Think and Grow Rich. And a lot of people, a lot of really big entrepreneurs will tell you that that is the number one book to read. Because, and, like, Rich, in the context of the book, does talk about finances a lot, but not in the sense of, like, this is where you invest, and this, no, not like that. No, it's more of, like, going back to abundance mindset, like seeing what's out there and going for it. So he wasn't able to start making that dedication until he was 25. I think he says in his book, or maybe it is Dale Carnegie who says this in Win Friends or How to Win Friends and Influence People. A lot of these writers didn't figure stuff out until they were 25, 26. And that was like in the 50s or the 60s or the 20s or whenever it was, right? But, like, I was watching The Sopranos recently, and that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they talked about how with the way the world was advancing, that kids were younger longer, right? So, like, what was becoming a man at 21 or even 18, like, kids were sent to the war overseas for World War II, like 18-year-olds, right? And you had to become a man. And, like, same with Vietnam and Korea, right? But then we stopped fighting wars, right? And so then people, you know, like, they talk about it in Peaky Blinders too, which is, you know, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but they see, like, these kids who didn't have to fight in World War I, and they're just kind of like, man, they didn't have to grow up too fast. And so, like, Sopranos from my early life is talking about how, like, it's actually 27, 28 is when kids kind of go from adolescence into adulthood. And it honestly feels like it might be 30 now, 35. Like, I don't feel like I have friends that are parents. I have friends that have homes. I have friends that have, like, their jobs, their wives, their lives. It doesn't feel like any of us are really there, right, at adulthood. Like, I talk to people and I know I'm an adult, but, like, there is a key difference between where I'm at and where I think, like, not my parents at my age. I think my parents were late bloomers, but I think there are some people who are like I work with this guy, and he, at my age, had like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or maybe even a 6-year-old. His kids are pretty old, and he's not that much older than me. And like to hear that kind of, you know, adulthood being thrust upon him so young, I'm just like, man, I know I would handle it, but I don't know how. And so it's, I don't even know how I got on this. Oh, so it stands to reason that if people aren't maturing as much, right, then they're not going to find their life's purpose as early. And that could very well be the case, because I know for my friend, who had kids at a young age, he talks about how important it was for him to provide for his family and how that kind of really helped him determine, what he's supposed to be doing. And I think for Napoleon Hill at a young age, he realized like how he wanted to dedicate his life to learning these things. Like I said, Kobe Bryant at 13 was like, my purpose is to be the best at basketball. And he wasn't going to stop until he got there. And he was obsessed with it. And like obsession is a great thing when it's, pointed in the right direction. But it's a bad thing when it's just like not aimed at all. And that's what happens a lot to us because there's so much to hyperfixate on for the moment. And then just letting it pass. Finding your purpose is a very important thing. And we all know it. But it also feels like it's harder to do today. I don't know why. There's probably a myriad of reasons. It's not one. We always try to find the one culprit, but there's so many, right? Finding purpose is a tough thing, right? It's a lot easier to say that than to do it. But once you do, you can theoretically unlock it. Again, I don't think I've found my purpose. I'm close. I'm zeroing in on it, but I have not found it. Right now, I'm just meandering, right? Which is fine too, because you know what? I'm open to possibilities, right? I'm going on these walks to open up to a mind of to a world of abundance, right? So now I'm going to go to part 3. Okay, part 3 is there was a little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of a toe dip, if you will, into part 3 earlier on. Giants of Ambulatory Leadership, Case Studies in Motion. I should get a treadmill for this part, just walk my way over. I'm very curious what my neighbors think is happening right now, because they're probably like, man, this guy really thinks he's cooking up some answers, and I'm in here just talking about how I have no purpose in life. Gosh, perception is one hell of a drug. So I mentioned Steve Jobs. There are other people who like Diogenes and Nietzsche and Rousseau who all found intuitively, right, before any studies were conducted, because I do not think Friedrich Nietzsche was around in 2014. Correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to in the comments. Steve Jobs talked about the peripatetic, there's no way I'm saying these words right, visionary of Silicon Valley. Steve Jobs was the co-founder of Apple. If you didn't know that, no one really knows that. But he actually also, other than Pixar, he also helped co-found Apple. Is the archetype of the ambulatory leader. Walter Isaacson's biography reveals that Jobs' walking habit was intrinsic to his management style and creative process. Taking a long walk was his preferred way to have a serious conversation, Isaacson noticed. And so I talked about him having that conversation with Bob Iger earlier, the president of Disney at the time. And, there's other people he had these walks with, one of which was Johnny Ive. Jobs' walks were not limited to the outdoors. He frequently visited the industrial design lab to walk among the prototypes with Chief Design Officer Johnny Ive. I've described these sessions as grazing, where Jobs would wander past tables of models, handling them, pacing around them, and sensing the sweep of the whole company. He also is not the only one. Mark Zuckerberg famously went on a $19 billion walk. This is in 2014. Zuckerberg sought to acquire the messaging giant WhatsApp. The negotiation involved a staggering sum of eventually $19 billion, closing at $21.8 billion. Rather than conducting these sensitive talks in Facebook's glass-walled conference room, Zuckerberg and WhatsApp co-founder John Qualm engaged in a series of long walks in the hills above Silicon Valley. That was because it was secret. They wouldn't have prying eyes, eavesdropping ears. They would also allow philosophical alignment and then pressure release. The immense magnitude of the deal could have induced analysis paralysis. That's what's really interesting. I think it's going to come in a little bit later, but I'll do a little teaser here. When you are in the abundant mindset and you're trying to do the convergent thinking thing, you're going to kind of get into analysis paralysis, right? When you have the infinite world in front of you, you're going to want to take the best course of action. But there is no best course of action when the entirety of infinity is in front of you. So abundance mindset is a great thing, but it can also be very humbling in the sense that you will paralyzing, where you're just like I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but Saturday morning comes around sometimes and I have no plans and I'm like, what am I going to do for the next 2 days? I could do anything. And I have to throw caveats on it. And fortunately for me, I've had the opportunity to start budgeting recently, which has helped limit a lot of my options. I'm going to be getting into this later. So I'll come back, but just enjoy that little Costco free sample. All right. That's what I do on my Saturdays. I graze Costco looking for single moms and free samples. That's what my life is. I look like a burnout. It's so funny. I bought this at Walmart in 2021 and it's like a triple XL. And I love that it's orange tie-dye, but I really just bought it because I was cold in Flagstaff. But one of the tie-dyes looks just like a marijuana leaf, just right in the center of my chest. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't have enough leaves or fingers to the leaf, but it for sure a burnout hoodie. Other notable people who would walk: Ludwig von Beethoven. His daily routine included vigorous walks in the Viennese woods from noon until evening. He carried a pencil and music paper as his most profound musical ideas. The divergent creative leaps arrived in the rhythm of his gait being his step, which that blew my mind. Think about that. I've made a little bit of music on Logic. I made the theme song to this show. But he was literally just writing notes on a paper and being like, nah, that cooks. Nah, yeah, that cooks. Oh yeah, no, I'm hearing that and that's definitely a C note. But he's doing it for a whole orchestra. It's just crazy to me that people can do that. Think about that. There are people who can literally just think in music. I don't know. Blows my mind, right? Just some people can think in language. Charles Dickens, a voracious walker, Dickens would traverse London for 20 miles at a time, often at night. He described these walks, talk about male privilege. He described these walks as essential for his mental stability and creative output. The sensory input of the city streets, the faces, the fog, the architecture, fed his default mode network, allowing him to weave the complex multi-character narratives for which he is famous. And then finally, Aristotle, the founder of the Peripatetic school of philosophy, taught while walking in the Lyceum's colonnades. The physical movement was seen as a way to keep the mind agile and the discourse fluid. And that's what they were talking about with Steve Jobs, because he was actually a really big fan of Aristotle's. He read a lot of his work, and is partially where he may have gotten the idea from to do the walk and talk meetings. So synthesizing parts 1, 2, and 3, right? Like I said, this episode is going to be two disparate ideas. There's divergent and convergent thinking, and there's the walking cure, and then there's limitation, right? And so the first 3 parts were the walking, right? We get into how the neurophysiology works. We talked about philosophers. We talked about people who did it, and we also talked about the Stanford Study in 2014 that helped really show the importance and how well it worked for divergent thinking, but not necessarily convergent thinking. in the next part 4, freedom through limitation. In this next part, it talks about one artist in particular, one literary artist in particular, Dr. Seuss. We'll just jump in with. I just feel like I'm not offering a lot when I'm just reading this AI deep research, but it's also just interesting information, and I feel like they've done a really good job writing it, and I feel like it helps with creating jumping off points. While walking provides the kinetic release to generate ideas, the modern knowledge worker faces a second hurdle, the paralysis of abundance. In an age of infinite information, tools, and choices, creativity often withers not from a lack of options, but from an excess of them. Psychological research and historical case studies demonstrate the constraint, the imposition of strict limits, is the necessary counterweight to the freedom of movement. And again, I did allude to this earlier, and I was right. We were going to come back to analysis paralysis. So the psychology of abundance versus resourcefulness. I've touched on this a few times in this episode already, but we often assume that having more resources, more time, more money, more words leads to better outcomes. Psychology suggests the opposite. This phenomenon is known as the paradox of choice or analysis paralysis. So the term analysis paralysis describes the state of overthinking and second guessing caused by an abundance of options. The etymology is revealing analysis comes from the Greek word for loosening, while paralysis implies a loss of power. When faced with infinite possibilities, the brain's executive function becomes overloaded. Trying to evaluate the perfect choice, the fear of making the wrong decision leads to making no decision. I don't know if you did a Spotify Wrapped or an Apple Wrapped or a YouTube Wrapped or Chalupa Wrap. But there is literally like, this is all the data we collected from you in the last year. And it's been packaged this is not a creepy thing we're showing you, but actually a really cute, fun thing that you can share with other people on other platforms that are also collecting all your information. Isn't that amazing? And we're also going to tell you what kind of person you are, what kind of psychological profile we built off of who you are and what your viewing habits are. It's actually really creepy. But I bit and I looked at it for my ChatGPT because I don't know if you know this, but ChatGPT also, this is a really AI heavy episode. ChatGPT also had a Wrapped. I was like, okay, let's look at this. And so I went through it and then I was like, oh, it's an actual like conversation. So I started asking it questions like if a person looked at my entire year worth of chats and wanted to give me the best advice they could based off of that year of what would they say? And essentially it basically gave me the same thing, which was saying like, you're too precious with it. Like you're too focused on getting it right, not getting it done was really the thing. And I was like, that's really interesting because I do that a lot. I do in a lot of ways. And like, it makes sense why it was saying that because I would always be like, do it again. That's not right. This is how I changed it. This was a better way of phrasing it. Like I was always iterating with ChatGPT. I just never liked what it gave me. And so I think it was mainly just saying, dude, you need to chill out, like take a breather, man. What happens with analysis paralysis is you have everything in front of you and it's just overwhelming that you can't make a decision. So sometimes the best decision is the first decision. Like I went into college not knowing what I wanted to do and I was undecided and the whole world is in front of you. It's hard to make a decision. Getting into constraints, right? For creative processing, let's do the mindset shift. Constraints force a cognitive shift from an abundance mindset to a resourcefulness mindset, whereas abundance mindset, I have everything I need, so I don't need to look for new connections. This breeds complacency and cliches, right? So like, okay, if you are interested in behind the scenes film, stuff like that, you can see how like Roger Deakins did 1917. They had everything available to them, right? And there was a lot of creativity there still. I don't want to downgrade it. I don't want to downgrade it at all because they were literally using soldiers. Like there was a lot of resourcefulness in there, right? But like they had the budget to have like cars with cranes driving 30 miles an hour, filming like people running, right? The average person doesn't. So there's this great little like profile on Instagram you should follow called Shitty Rigs. Like every camera person's like, oh, do you follow Shitty Rigs? This is my shittiest rig. And like it shows the most resourceful way that they created something. And so if you want to see some really cool stuff, like they get really cool shots and a lot of stuff. And then like, there's a lot of cool things on the internet where it's like, oh, this is the bare bones way I got this shot done or this done. Right. And so the resourcefulness mindset is I do not have what I need. So I must use what I have in a new way. Right. This breeds innovation. Right. So this is great. Like I don't have a drone. There's this really cool person. I don't know what they're on, but my dad sent me their videos once. They don't have a drone, but they put a GoPro on like a 40-foot stick and started filming stuff like it was a drone taking off and all this stuff. And it's super cool to see like, oh, you can still manage to get that look, that feel, that style without that product. And I think it's a really cool thing. I think it talks about this term called the creative squeeze. Fewer resources force the brain to bypass standard neural pathways and forge new connections to solve the problem. As discussed in the book, a beautiful constraint limits are not roadblocks, but propelling questions that force us to ask, how can we achieve X without Y? And why don't we have Z? Thank you. I'll be here all year. So the Dr. Seuss effect, the reason we brought up Dr. Seuss is a fun thing I learned in this was in 1960, he had just written The Cat in the Hat using a list of 225 words. His publisher, Bennett Cerf, who founded Random House, you've definitely heard of a Random House book. They're pretty popular. Believed Dr. Seuss could not go lower. He bet $50 that he could not write an engaging, coherent children's book using only 50 distinct words. The book Green Eggs and Ham only uses 50 distinct words. It's really interesting. It's really cool to see that like the constraint forced him to look at this in a completely new way. Like the constraint forced him to strip the story down to its absolute essence. He could not rely on lazy, quote unquote, storytelling. He had to use rhythm, repetition, and conflict to drive the page turns. So then it breaks down the 50-word structure where pronouns I, me, you, them, they established the protagonist and Sam I am. And then the verbs am, are, be, do, eat, like, let, may, say, see, try, will, would are all action-oriented, drives the narrative forward. So it literally breaks down what each word does for the story. Like full on just like what is its pure utilitarian aspect. And you hear this, right? And you look at this in such a clinical, analytical way, and you're just like, how is this art? But the book actually moves, right? Like it has narrative structure to it. And like, yeah, it's a little annoying. Like, no, I don't like green eggs and ham. No, I won't, Sam I am, or whatever it is, right? Continuing. So now we're getting into nouns. Boat, box, car, eggs, fox, goat, ham, house, mouse, rain, Sam, train, tree. Concrete imagery creates the escalating absurd scenarios. And then there's connectors, a, and, anywhere, could, dark, good, green, here, if, in, not, on, or, so, thank you, that, the, there, with. These are the glue that keep the rhyme together. And then the main antagonist through the story is not, right? So the pronouns established. The protagonist, the word not, is the antagonist of the text. The outcome, the result of this extreme restriction was not a stunted book, but a masterpiece. Green Eggs and Ham became Dr. Seuss's best-selling work, moving over 200 million copies. The constraint did not limit the creativity, it distilled it. Like I said, it sounds so clinical. It sounds so devoid of life. It sounds like it's going to miss the mark so hard. And it's in this limitation, it's in this severe resourcelessness that he creates resourcefulness, right? Like he has no resources. He has 50 words. That's it. How do you create a gripping narrative? And Ernest Hemingway has a great one. For sale, baby shoes never worn. It reads, for sale, baby shoes, comma, never worn, comma. Tells the story. Theoretically, it's a pretty sad story, like of a hope. Like it starts hopeful. Then why are these baby shoes being sold? Oh, the kid probably grew up. No, they were never worn. There's a group of French mathematicians called Oulipo, the Oeuvre de littérature potentielle. I don't know French. I don't know why I'm trying to say this in a French accent like I know French. I don't. A group of French writers and mathematicians founded in 1960, including Georges Perec and Italo Calvino, rejected the romantic notion of the inspired writer with infinite freedom. They believed that arbitrary constraints were necessary to trigger the true creativity. They viewed constraints as a way to checkmate the writer's habits, forcing them out of their comfort zone, which is really interesting to think about. Like, so there's 4 chord songs, right? Like it's D, A minor, G, and C. Most songs, have these 4 chords in them, yet they're all so diverse. Like there's Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm sure, I don't know if Bohemian Rhapsody, I'll go to songs I know, like Poker Face, right? And like I'm a Bird. There's a great, I forget the band's name. It's Ace of something like that. But they have the 4, just look up the 4 chords song, and they go through a list of all these songs that use the same 4 chords, and they create, seamlessly add them all together narratively in this joking manner. That's really funny. Axis of Awesome is their name. Axis of Awesome, 4 chords song. If you haven't heard it, you probably have it. It was pretty popular. This kind of idea really made me think about haikus. You have 7 to 11 syllables, and you have to tell a story. You have to deliver a message in just that many syllables. Not words, syllables. Like theoretically, there are words that are 7 syllables. Default mode network is close. I don't want to count up the syllables. You're getting the point, right? There are multiple forms of art that come from restriction, that come from limitation, that once you apply, it's like the idea is your resources are the lemons. You're making lemonade. You got to get the creative squeeze to get that juice out. But the creative squeeze is engineering constraints in order to make this happen. I'm going to get X done by Y, right? I'm going to write a book that only has 50 words, 50 distinct words. I'm going to create an album with only 4 chords or other options. It's just so beautiful. I had a teacher once, a math teacher, explaining, what's the simplest form. She was an algebra teacher, and she was trying to explain. It wasn't the best analogy, but she was just like, what's the simplest form of the dog ran to the neighbor's yard? And then we were all like, okay, well, the dog ran to the yard. Well, no, you could probably just say the dog ran. And then we were like, that's as simple as it gets. And she goes, no, that's not it. And we're like, what? And she's like, no. The most simple form is dog. Now that I see what she's saying if a child saw a dog and just pointed and said, dog, look. And so the metaphor she was using it for was solve for X in algebra. This is a long time ago. that is kind of the idea here, is like, how do we get this to its core? Like, how do we get words to be antagonist and protagonist in a story? You know, like, how do we get them to be their most utilitarian, like, version of themselves? How do we tell a story in 6 words, 7 syllables, 11 syllables? So getting into kind of a synthesis of this whole episode, the integration of walking cure and freedom through limitation offers a powerful blueprint for modern professionalism. We can construct a cognitive workflow that leverages biological priming and physiological framing to maximize output. The micro challenge, jumpstarting the engine when a project is stalled. The cause is often the abundance of options, analysis paralysis. The solution is to apply a micro challenge, a severe artificial constraint to break the inertia. In the sense of, like, how do you eat the world's largest pizza one bite at a time? You would create artificial constraints that would keep you on task and engaged, right? Like, oh, we want to make this production for $10,000. Why $10,000? It just has to be $10,000 because we need a limit. If we don't have a limit, it's going to get up to $100,000. And that's a completely different thing than $10,000. But we can make it for $10,000, can't we? Well, I don't know if that's the case. We would need to, do this, that, and this other thing. It's like, well, how would you do that if you were doing it for $10,000? Creativity starts rolling. Resourcefulness engaged. So for your next project that's stalled, when you don't know what to do, ding-a-ling-a-ling. There's your call to action. So I talked about it in the last episode. The cheapest way to create is to just think, to just tell a story in your head. But try and find the easiest, simplest way, like try and find the most simple way to be creative. Create a limitation for yourself and get going. Okay, I have one sheet of paper and this pen and all the ink that's in it. I want to make a picture, or maybe you want to make a plane. You can literally make whatever you want, but it's only with the pen and the paper. That's your first creative task, right? Because if Ernest Hemingway can write an entire story in 6 words with a little bit of punctuation, and it's not even a complete sentence, then you can create a universe with a pen and a single paper. Limiting yourself to a very finite space is going to create resourcefulness. If I told you, write a book with one paper, you're going to start folding the paper into multiple pages. What? You could use scissors to cut it. It's still the one piece of paper. Maybe you write on toilet paper, so then you have an entire roll, and it's a lot longer than a piece of paper, right? So think about that. This was a cool one. It's the circles test. The task was participants received a sheet with 30 blank circles. They have 3 minutes to turn as many circles as possible into recognizable objects. Clock, sun, face, coin, any kind of recognizable object that is a circle. The insight was most adults failed to fill all 30. They would self-edit. They were only looking for good ideas. They'd get stuck in a single category. They'd be like, oh, well, I could do coins. I could do a penny, a quarter, a dime, right? A euro. But then there's 30. Can you list 30 different pieces of currency? Probably. You're amazing. I believe in you. The exercise forces the participant to lower their quality filter, transient hypofrontality, and prioritize quantity and speed. It is an excellent warm-up before a walking brainstorm session. What was really cool about that one is kids would often fill them all out because they didn't care. They're like, this is a smiley face, and this is, like a speaker, and this is a cup, but you're looking down on the cup. There's kids, but literally, you tell them to fill 30 spaces, they'll fill 30 spaces in 3 minutes. They're like, oh, here we go. But the parents and the adults, they have the the executive filter, and the hypofrontality is not happening. So they're too much in the inner critic in the front forehead. This is what it suggests. Based on the evidence reviewed, the optimal creative workflow is not a straight line, but a cycle of expansion and contraction. Phase 1 would be the constraint, define the problem with strict limits, cognitive state, resourcefulness, and then create the propelling question that demands a novel solution. Then part 2, right, is expansion, right? So then you would go on the walk, disengage from the screen, walk, engage transient hypofrontality, the default mode network activation, and divergent thinking to get that 60% boost that they talked about, which is 81 to 100% of participants came up with novel ideas after a walk. Allow the inner critic to go to sleep and start having some fun, wacky ideas. Phase 3 would be the capture, recording the ideas generated during the walk immediately. This is to engage, like capture everything that came out of it as quickly as possible. Harvest the insights before your brain kind of fires back on and you start having to hear that inner critic again. And then the execution is to sit down and focus and lock yourself in a room and go. So like, here's the takeaway for you based off of this, right? I propose the idea of a piece of paper and a pen. You can make literally anything you've ever wanted with a piece of paper and a pen. Now go for a walk. Go for a 30-minute walk. Do a 30-minute loop, all right, which is about, I think, 2 miles for me. So let's just say 2 miles for you, or 1.5 miles. Walk 15 minutes away from your home and then walk back. Simple. All right. When you get back, record all the ideas you had on the walk about what you would put on that paper. Well, I guess we could skip the third one, the phase 3. So, okay, let's just say, all right, here's your takeaway. All right, I'm making this on the fly, so give me some credit. Gosh, give me some slack. Gosh. You know what? You could be abundant with your you could be abundant and generous with your compliments, and a little bit more constrained with your criticisms. People, make sure to like and subscribe. Step 1 in this episode, what I want you to do is I want you to get out a piece of paper and a pen. All right. Then I want you to think about, you're going to be creative today. Okay. This is the bare minimum, all right? Piece of paper, pen, all right? Put them down. Put on your walking shoes. Put on your best walking fit. Walk 15 minutes away from your house. Turn around, come back, and then start creating on that piece of paper. Don't check your phone. Don't put on music. Just, from this research, it would say don't put on music. From previous episodes, it would say put on like white noise at 70 decibels, not a decibel higher, not a decibel lower, 70 decibels. You hear me? All right. And then just see what you create. All right. I think you can do it. I believe in you. I do think that would be a cool thing. But see, what I would love for you to have at the end of the day is just one task that you could point to, right? And just be like, boom, cool, I can do that, right? Because I feel like this sounds simple, but I think someone would be like, who has the time to spend an hour and 15 minutes? Because my next thought was, then this could be the 45 minutes of doing something creative that helps you live 7 years longer than everyone else. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if this is your first episode or you just skipped the previous episode, in the previous episode, I talked about how creative thinking and problem solving and strategic thinking can help keep your brain 7 years younger than your age counterparts. So like if you're 77, but you are a tango dancer, you're theoretically mentally 70. That is study supported. Again, in the last episode. The last episode's not as good as this one. I'm going to be honest. This episode kind of slapped. Probably because I went on a walk before this. Hey, yo. The takeaway from this episode is what you're going to do tomorrow or if there's time today, because I don't think anyone's going to listen to me before they go to bed, but I'm about to go to bed because it's literally so late. I thought I was going to be going to bed at like my normal time. It is currently 2 hours later than my normal time that I would start getting ready for bed. And I would clearly have a long way before sleep. And I'm also jazzed. I'm pretty excited about this. I love this idea. I'm going to start telling people to do this. Like, I'm going to be like, hey, when was the last time you were creative? And they're going to be like, I don't know. Because every time you ask someone a question that's not how you're doing, they don't know how to respond. It's crazy. If you ever want to just like lose faith in like critical thinking, just ask someone a different question than the default. Or give them a different answer. I ran into someone recently. They're like, how you doing? And I was like, I'm all right. And they're like, just all right. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm just living. She's like, why not good? I was like, because it doesn't have to be good. It can just be. I'm going to start asking people, when was the last time you were creative? And they're going to be like, what? I don't know. Like, oh, what was the most creative thing you did this week? I don't know. And then be like, all right, well, you know what you should do tomorrow? You should take a 30-minute walk, and when you come back from that walk, draw something. But only draw what you think about on your walk. And be like, what do you mean? And be like, so like pull out a piece of paper and a pen. All right? And when you come back, you're going to draw something. You're going to just, you don't even have to draw something. You just have to create something with the piece of paper and the pen. That's up to you, what you create, but you have to go for the walk first. So you walk 15 minutes from your house, walk 15 minutes back, and then you create. I think that's a winner. I think this one's pretty cool. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I mean, someone's listening to these. There are 8 people out there who are watching these. I don't know who they are. I know who one of them is. He's a real homie. It's a man I trust with my life, and I have been proven I shouldn't, but I still do. I'm sure there's other great people listening. I just don't know who you are. But I appreciate you. I do. Because as I circle what my life's purpose is, what my purpose is, you're along for the ride. So I appreciate it. Again, I feel really good about this episode. I really like it. Yeah. I should have done more constraints. I'm going to think about that for the next episode. I think the next episode is going to be like really constrained. That's going to be my task to myself. So for the next episode, it's going to be like, if that's your first episode watching, you're going to be like, what? Or listening to, you're going to be like, why would this guy do an entire podcast from an airplane bathroom? That's pretty funny. Would ruin the flight for everyone else. So I'm not going to do that, but that would be pretty cool to just like, imagine being outside that bathroom waiting, like just waiting outside the bathroom on a plane, like a Spirit Airlines flight. And you're just waiting to take the worst dump of your life because you had airport food and you're just like, your stomach is just in knots. The Hudson News sushi did me dirty. For some reason, I thought that wouldn't be a problem. Now I have to wait for the one working bathroom on the Spirit Airlines flight. And the guy's in there talking to himself. Wait, what is he saying? You put your ear up to the door and you're just like, so the default mode network interacts with the hypofrontality, and transient hypofrontality creates creative problem solving. And this is why I hate AI, but I also used AI to make this episode. And this guy literally just like has to shit his pants outside the door as I'm just recording a podcast and so like, good luck, buddy. Anyway, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Go create something and tell me about it. Have a good one.